ask that the live stream of this meeting be enabled. Yeah, thank you. We're now live. Right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this virtual meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, which is being held in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. Before we move to the formal business, for the benefit of those joining us online, I would first like to introduce myself, the committee, alongside the key officers who are supporting us here today. I am Councillor Hilary Mitchell, and I'm chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councillors Dave Dagger, Alan Garbutt, Nick Stounsby and Graham Stokes, alongside Mr John Morrison, who is our independent member. The officers joining us today are Gillian Marshall, the Council's Chief Legal Officer, Neil Warren, the Chief Finance Officer, Mark Tolson, the Governance Manager, Julie Cousins, Principal Audit Manager, Bradley Frost, Corporate Risk Manager, Colette Tyrrell, Group Finance Manager. Throughout the meeting, we will be joined by officers who are to present their individual reports, and I will introduce and welcome them at the appropriate time. I'd also like to extend a welcome to our external audit partners from Deloitte, that is Nicola Wright and Helen Taylor. Before we move on to the formal agenda items, I'd just like to confirm today's meeting procedures. We will take each item on the agenda in order, copies of which have been provided to members, and the agenda, as always, is available on the Council's website. I would remind colleagues to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting, unless invited to speak, to minimise the potential of background noise disrupting the meeting broadcast. When invited to speak, please unmute your microphone and state your name before addressing committee, and then remute once you have finished speaking. At the end of the debate on each item, I will seek confirmation from the meeting that you agree to the proposed recommendations. If everyone is happy, then I shall proceed with the formal business. Item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
We just have apologies from Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is Chair's remarks. I don't have any more to add. There are no urgent items, so we'll move on to item 4. Do any members have any interest to verbally declare on the matters before us? I will take silence to indicate that there are no interests to be declared. Okay. Right. Agenda item 5 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 18th of January. Are the minutes moved?
Move the minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Are they seconded? Anybody, please?
Yes, Chair. John Morrison.
I thank you very much. All in favour? It appears so. Any against? No, right, that's carried. Agenda item 6 is the review and challenge of priority risks. Before I ask Bradley to introduce this item, you'll recall that at our last meeting we selected the risks relating to climate change and economic growth as the 2 risks we would like to review and seek assurance. I'd like to welcome Mike Genby, who will be presenting the item on economic growth, but I'm afraid Gary Blenkinsop, who was due to be here, unfortunately can't be. So I suggest that we leave the risk relating to climate change, leave that report until the next meeting. Is that everybody in agreement? Yes. Okay. Right, thank you. So now I'd like to ask Bradley if you could present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So for the notes, I'm Bradley Frost and I'm the Corporate Risk Manager, and I routinely present the risk item to this committee on a quarterly basis. What I intend to do is I intend to start off by a brief introduction, and I will then hand over to Mike, who will go through the assurance item relating to economic growth. So if I can start by referring members to page 7 of the report and to point 2.1, and just to clarify that the purpose of the report is to share details of the Council's priority risks with this committee and with members, to notify members of any significant amendments to the risks since they were last presented, to provide members with the opportunity to challenge the risks that are presented, and also to allow members to select items where further scrutiny and/or assurance is required. I would then like to refer members to page 8 of the report and to point 5.4, the priority risk assurance item. And at this point, I would like to hand over to Mike Denby to present on this item, please.
Thanks, Bradley. Thanks, Chair. Today's presentation will just give you a bit of a flavour as to the current mitigations against the identified risk in the report. The first thing we established as part of the pandemic was the Economic Recovery Group. It's a group that's made up of key partners and a number of key identifiable work streams, mainly aimed at supporting small businesses through the pandemic, something that we all get behind. As it currently stands, we are still partway through a number of those work streams, and it is anticipated that the Economic Recovery Board continue during the restart phase that the Chancellor has planned and was announced over the weekend. Brexit obviously has been a significant risk, and it's something that we've built into 100% of conversations with businesses, particularly over the last 2-3 years. And it's something that we monitor on a bi-weekly through a number of different data reports from the conversations that we've been having with businesses. COVID-19, we developed a response plan which set out a series of actions, and that comes to the end at the end of this month, actually 31st of March. That initially was a 6-month response plan, which was extended to 9 months as a result of further national restriction measures. And that again is a report with a series of interventions that's been approved by Cabinet, and that is to help and support businesses of all sizes during the pandemic. And it includes things such as grants for businesses, additional support for new start businesses, and it's quite pragmatic because we also help businesses to downsize, those that are looking to make redundancies, to ensure that we're supporting residents back into the world of work, and we're supporting the business whilst it is downsizing to be a sustainable business for the future. In terms of monitoring this activity, there's a series of key performance indicators and milestones that are monitored on a monthly basis. We do provide insight reports to the corporate management team, the leadership team on a bi-weekly basis, and we've got strict governance at both the Economic Recovery Board and also the economic subgroup of the Recovery Board. We try and work with businesses in order to share and shape initiatives through the Successful Business Group. This is another group that is run on a bi-weekly basis. And we also have regular meetings with the business enterprise innovation and skills, and that's named as BASE for those of you that are familiar with the government body. We meet with those on a weekly basis across the city region. So focusing on a few key themes that have been really important to us over the last 12-18 months. The first one is the Brexit transition. 100% of staff who work within the Economic Growth Service have received Brexit transition training. This is to ensure that, again, we are supporting businesses during every conversation. There are a number of funded activity streams from the Leeds City region where we're working closely with the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation for Small Business to offer intensive support for businesses. Some of the key things that we're finding at this moment in time is the support around the VAT rules. So we've got webinars and training sessions that can support businesses around VAT, certificates of origin in terms of breaking that down, the whole process, and how we can help business to fulfil the requirement for have a certificate of origin for each part of their supply chain. And the biggest challenge faced by business is the extra costs in which are incurred as a result of the UK leaving the European Union. Things such as additional courier fees, admin costs, and slower processing times, of which again we're working with businesses to speed that up and trying to support businesses to work together in order to solve some of these problems. As we're aware, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but national restrictions do continue. It'd be fair to say the bulk of our work is supporting those that are mandated to close, trying to issue grants and trying to support businesses to look beyond the pandemic and establish a business plan as part of the restart scheme. The Chancellor did announce, and it's not in the report because it was only announced over the weekend, but more support for businesses as part of the restart scheme, and the local authority has been identified as being an organisation which will support a number of those initiatives that the Chancellor's announced. So in future sessions when I come here, I'm sure you'll be hearing about that and the work that we're doing as part of the restart phase. And for us, it's about meaningful conversations with business to ensure that they've got all the support that they do require. The numbers of phone calls and contact that we're receiving from business continues. I think we're averaging around 500 one-to-ones that we're having with businesses on a 2-week basis, so 1,000 a month as it currently stands. But we do find that any announcements does increase that. So, for example, over the weekend there was the announcement, and we've received significantly more than that when we're coming to work this morning. It's fair to say a lot of the work is to support businesses as well around those that are looking to make redundancies. Some big high street brands have made recent announcements. Debenhams, Topman, Topshop, Burton's, Haribo is a local one in which are making a number of redundancies. And what we have been doing throughout all of this is supporting the business to ensure that we can get access to the residents and support them through the council's Step Up programme to help individuals that are furthest from the job market back into the world of work. And what we are doing is, when we are having the meaningful conversations with businesses, for those that are growing, we're identifying what vacancies they've got so that we can match the vacancy and the individuals that have been affected through redundancy. So again, no conversation is going to waste to ensure that we can get residents back into employment. Initiatives such as the Kickstart scheme to support individuals and to pay the wages of individuals for work placements has also been proving a popular initiative. The local authority, we are a provider on this scheme, and so far we've identified 240 job vacancies from the businesses that we're working with. And across the entire district, there's a number of partners working on this. There's only been 9 thus far because it's early in its stage. 9 individuals that have secured employment, but from those 9, 6 have come through the economic growth service at the council. So we're really proud of that, and we hope that will continue as the scheme significantly progresses over the months ahead. And then last but not least, very important, at the next cabinet as a proposal for a new inward investment and business support strategy that will replace the response plan. So that's comes to the end at the 31st of March. This will then continue from that, and the inward investment strategy will again look to support our existing businesses across the district, but look to encourage more businesses to the Wakefield district as well. And again, moving forward, it's going to be about business resilience and supporting businesses to be the best they can be as they go into the recovery and the restart phase out of the pandemic. And that concludes my report, and I welcome any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. I think we'd all agree that the business support that people have been able to obtain from the council has been very good, and obviously it's within the restrictions of the government. But everybody who's got it, I know, has had to get something, has been very impressed with the speed of it turned up and ease in which you could apply. So that's been obviously a huge positive. I've got a lot of concerns about the loss of Debenhams and Topshop and Topman, partly in terms of keeping Trinity Walk viable. I mean, is that just me, or are everybody else sort of happy enough thinking that Trinity Walk will be okay?
I think it's it's a justifiable concern. That will create a number of void units. We are meeting with the Savills, is the company who runs Trinity Walk, to have a look at what their strategy is to address that. If there's ways of carving up the units to attract more small to medium enterprises, because they've got some big major space users as part of the Trinity Walk, with the bigger brands going down. And again, that's a strategy within itself, and it's the town's deal board that we're working with on that to make sure that we're offering as much support to the owners of Trinity Walk as we can do. Savills is part of a bigger network, run a number of shopping centres, so they may have a black book of growing businesses during this time in which they could look to do deals with to fill those units, and again, further details will come out over time, but yeah, we're doing all we can to look at alternative uses for those units.
Yeah, because the Debenhams one is absolutely enormous. It'll be very big. Right, I've got two more questions, one from Councillor David Dagger. David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning, Mike. First of all, can I congratulate you and your team, for all the hard work that you've done in supporting businesses throughout this pandemic period. However, have you found any businesses that's been hard to reach, or any that you cannot support?
I think it'd be fair to say the hardest to reach at this moment in time, and has been throughout the whole of this, is the logistics distribution sector. Many of them are very busy at the moment, so we're finding that quite a challenge in which to access those guys, to try and get the vacancies that we're looking for, so that again we can link them to residents that's been affected through redundancies. It can also be quite a challenge for those organisations that have made an announcement on redundancies, which, to be honest, it's something that surprises me. So, for example, certain brands that are making an announcement on redundancies, you would think they would welcome our support to help their workers find alternative employment. But sometimes at the head office, they put a bit of a blocker on that. So what we've got to do is try and find those individuals, whether it be through LinkedIn or through other job boards, or if we make contact with one person, they might then set up a WhatsApp group so we can access them one way or another. But it would be good to do it through the employer, because we want access to those individuals that have been made redundant. So there's alternative strategies. However, the ideal and the most efficient way would be for on a regional level or a head office level, say yes, absolutely, you've got access to our workers to help them find more opportunities. But fortunately, that's not always the case, and that is a frustration. But we do what we can, David, to get access to those individuals and those Wakefield residents that have been affected.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
I have a question from Councillor Graham Stokes. Graham.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, Graham.
On external funding, I see that we've accessed quite a few £1 million to the European Social Fund. Now we've left Europe, is that likely to not be available in future? And are you aware of any government plans to replace European Social Fund money with government funding? We've also got a question for Bradley on the exiting the EU. We've archived the risk, and I just wondered if that's been done too early, as Brexit is still creating a risk for local businesses.
Do you want me to pick up the first one, Bradley, and I'll let you pick up the second one after?
If you will, Mike. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. You're absolutely right, Graham. We, at this moment in time, we do have a number of projects that involve European funding, of which we've still got time to spend that money. We don't need to spend that in some cases until 2023. However, there is a UK Prosperity Fund in which has been established. I think I've got a meeting about it this week as well. And again, as a local authority, to make sure that we are managing the risk, is our job is to make sure we're always around the table. We've always got a strong voice around the table for the UK Prosperity Fund, and that we are plumbed into a new way of distributing funding. So again, my team, when we are going there, it may be a retraining exercise on how funding is applied for in the future, but essentially we aim to be as proactive as ever when it comes to accessing funding streams, albeit it'll be through the UK Prosperity Fund. It'll be slightly different to applying for European funding, but again, we try and be as aggressive as we can be to get that and secure that funding for the good of Wakefield businesses and residents.
Okay, thank you.
If I can now pick up on the second part of the question in terms of the exiting the EU risk, a lot of discussion went on around this risk. As the risk is currently worded, it is a reflection of the period up to exiting the EU. So I think it was right and proper at that point to archive the risk, because the risk in effect disappears at the point where we exit the EU. I think notwithstanding that, the councillor is correct in saying obviously the legacy of EU exit is a longer term thing. So what we have done is we've done a couple of things to provide assurance to members. One thing that we have done is that in the latest review of the risks, we have asked risk owners to consider the longer term impacts of exiting the EU against the other specific risks that we hold within the council. And we're also in the process of considering the fact that that risk in itself can be archived, but do we need to create an additional further risk which specifically looks at the longer term impacts of post exit? And that is something that we're currently working in train with at the moment. And if it is worked up and scored, it would then be presented back to members at a future date if we saw fit. So there is some assurance there that yes, we are looking to archive that specific risk as it was worded, but there's a lot of assurance work going on around exiting EU and the ongoing risks that we face.
Okay. Cheers.
Chair, could I just follow up again on Councillor Stokes' question, because there's
Yes.
an important thing that I've not mentioned this morning as well is yes, whilst there's the UK Prosperity Fund, obviously devolution's prime at the moment for us to make sure again we've got a voice at those meetings. We're already seeing some positives from devolution in terms of funding coming forward. There was a gain share fund in which there's a number of projects that will support businesses and residents again as we move into the restart phase. So similar to that as well, it's about maximising the devolution agenda and the funding streams that are available through devolution on a regional basis as well. So again, it's almost an option for the UK Prosperity Fund as well as devolution and maximising that as well.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Bradley, for those answers. John Morrison, you have a question?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Another one for Bradley, please. Bradley, could you have a look at the evaluation? Because it shouldn't be the case that the residual risk is scored higher than the inherent risk. I'm on page 15 in the summary.
Hi, John. Yeah, I've made a note of that, and I will have a look at that, and I will I'll feedback directly to you in terms of the reasoning behind that. But yeah, I take your point entirely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At the end of the questions, it appears to be. Bradley, have you anything to add?
And I just have in terms of the assurance item from Mike, no, but I do have a few more items to go through in terms of the supporting report.
Okay.
So if I can refer members back to the report and page 9, at the bottom of page 9, just under point 5.8, members may recall that historically I just put a blank heat map for reference in my report. What I've decided to do this time is I've actually started to map the priority risks against the heat map. The reason I've done that is I believe that it gives a simple visual snapshot to members in terms of the risks. I think it allows members to have a greater appreciation of, in effect, the risk landscape, so where the risks sit. It also allows us to sort of identify where risks are clustered. So an example of this would be the 3 communities related risks, which are all sitting together as an impact of 4 and a probability of 3. I also want to point out that I will, if members are happy with the new map, I will continue to produce this going forward, and it will over time become a sort of a bit of a journey in travel. So if members can see the COVID-19 risks which we have escalated this time, obviously the red arrow within the heat map signifies the fact that that risk has escalated over this period. So for me, it just sort of hopefully is a useful addition and gives members a little bit more clarity in terms of the overall risk picture. Over the page on page 10, just to highlight to members the key risk amendments during this period. So on the table at point 2.2, we had already discussed the risk that we're proposing to archive around exiting the EU, so I won't touch on that item further. A little bit lower down, we're also looking to archive the risk relating to the leisure facility Aspire at the Park. The reason that we're looking to archive this risk now is that the building has been handed over to ourselves. The project has been delivered to time and to budget. Now, there are obviously some existing risks in terms of now moving the building forward and making it operational, but we feel right and proper that those risks actually sit within the project management team. But what I will do is I will again give assurance to members that I form part of that overarching project board. So I attend those meetings, and if I deem any risks again that are falling out of the project which aren't being managed appropriately, we do still have the option to escalate any of those going forward. And then at point 2.3, I'd already briefly mentioned the fact that we had a discussion at this committee a couple of months ago. Members had challenged, and rightly so, the risk relating to the COVID outbreak and had felt that we had underestimated the scoring of that risk, and in reflection of that, we have now escalated that risk, as can be seen. I will just point out, obviously, the risk as rescored was at a point in time in preparation for this meeting, so thankfully and positively, a number of positive events have now started to take against this risk in relation to areas including the vaccinations and obviously the downturn in figures relating to the virus. Potentially a risk which we had escalated at a point in time, but we will continue to monitor and reflect on, and hopefully we'll start scoring down in the coming months.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Or any comments? Yes, we've got a comment from the Councillor Nick Stansby. Nick.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Hi, Bradley. Yeah, I'm happy, as per email, I'm happy with the downgrading of the leisure facility risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stansby.
No problem. Thank you.
And then if I can then refer members, page 11.5.12 is historically I've always pointed out a couple of current risk items which I believe would warrant further assurance and scrutiny for members. Now, I've identified 2 risks here which I think would be worth being presented in greater detail going forward. One is on the safeguarding children, and the reasons, well, my rationale are captured in the comment. And the second one is around the failure of the independent care sector providers. Now, what I would suggest at this point, given that we have deferred the climate change assurance item, that potentially members would select one of those 2 items for an assurance piece at the next time that risk is presented. So if I can hand briefly over to members and see if there is one of those 2 risks that members feel will be more appropriate to be presented.
Right. Well, I can start off. I think the failure of independent care sector providers is extremely important, but we've got John Morrison wondering why we can't do all 3.
Too many. I think that's a fair point, John. Yeah, we can do all three. I'm just conscious of agenda sizes, but if members would like all three to come, then that's what will happen. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, right. So, are we all in favour of all three? I'll take silence as a yes. Well, yes from Nick. Yeah. I have no objection. Getting a message from Alan and David. Yeah, it seems to be generally speaking a yes.
That's noted then, Chair, and all three will come the next time that risk is presented. Thank you. And then finally, on the report on page 12, point 5.14, just wanted to appraise members that we are in the process of identifying a new risk in relation to the possible impacts of COVID-19 and how it could possibly impact on the forthcoming elections, that being either the local elections or the combined authority mayoral elections. And I think for ourselves, we're looking at the risk in terms of potential resourcing issues in the effect that, you know, anything happens where we have staff shortages. So we haven't had the opportunity to work the risk or a number of risks up as yet, but I think it is just right and proper just to give members the heads up at this point that it is an area that we are considering and we are looking at. And I'm working directly with Gillian and with the elections team to make sure that obviously if we are capturing some risks that we have the appropriate level of mitigations captured against those. And then I'm happy to take any further questions.
Okay, thank you, Bradley. Are there any further questions? I seem not. I think we'd all agree that the risk of COVID-19 hasn't gone away. It's getting better, but it's still actually worryingly high. So I think if that's it, if there are no more questions on this report, I can say thank you very much for your report. And we've selected those three specific risks for the scrutiny. So I think that's the conclusion of this agenda item. Thank you very much, Bradley and Mike.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Agenda item 7 is a report to inform the committee on the making of an order to create a mayoral combined authority in West Yorkshire and the associated governance arrangements and implications. This report is going to be presented by Gillian Marshall. Gillian.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a paper that was requested by the committee. You wanted to understand the governance arrangements that were in place around devolution and the combined authority. And it's actually timely that it's on your agenda today because it gives you the opportunity to consider a proposed protocol that is part of those arrangements. So apologies, the report is quite dense, but I'll just pick out a few things for you to consider. So obviously devolution is expected to bring significant benefits both to Wakefield and to the wider West Yorkshire region, and I think Mike already referenced that in his discussion about economic growth. The main benefit being around the gain share funding, and actually because the order has now been confirmed, some of that gain share funding will be available to us in this financial year, and the Cabinet is due to consider a report on the spending of that money at its next meeting. So the benefits are set out for you in sections 5.3 and 5.4, but essentially this is about making decisions more locally to West Yorkshire rather than those decisions being made in Westminster. So the governance arrangements for the combined authority are hardwired into the order that's been made. And some of those functions are to be exercised by the Mayor and some by the combined authority, and that's set out in section 5.5. Some of the functions which are being devolved to the region require the consent of the local authority in the decision is having an impact, and some of them are what's called concurrent functions where either the combined authority or the local authority can exercise the function. The best place to access the detail of that is in the appendix to the protocol which is attached to the report. 5.6 is an important paragraph in the report because it makes it clear there's no transfer of those concurrent functions from the local authority from Wakefield to the combined authority, and we don't need the combined authority's consent to exercise those functions in our normal way. What we have done, however, is to put a protocol in place. So where there is a requirement for consent or where there is a requirement for the function to be concurrent, the protocol at Appendix A sets out how we intend to work together as a partnership across West Yorkshire to be able to exercise those functions. Now, the protocol isn't legally binding. It doesn't need to be, because essentially the combined authority works best when it's a strong partnership of all the organisations, all of the West Yorkshire councils that are involved in it. But what it does is it commits all the parties to giving each other prior notice of the plans and opportunities that are around, so that the right information can be fed to and from the combined authority and the local authorities. At the very end of the report, I've included a section on scrutiny arrangements. So those are the arrangements which are for the combined authority to make, and they will be considering a proposal at their March meeting, which I believe is on the 9th of March. That does mean that the agenda with the details in has not yet been published, but my understanding is that there are to be 3 scrutiny committees for the combined authority, which will be an important part of accountability. I also reference in the report the Police and Crime Panel, which we currently have to hold the PCC to account. Because the PCC function will be combined with the mayoral function, there are some amendments to the Police and Crime Panel, but I can confirm for the committee that there will still be that accountability to a Police and Crime Panel, and Wakefield will still be the lead authority for that panel. Those adjustments are being made now to the terms of reference and the rules of procedure for the Police and Crime Panel. And then the other thing that all of the local authorities want is some direct engagement with the mayor, perhaps to come to a council meeting and answer some questions. So those arrangements are being worked up as proposals, and obviously after the election those proposals will be put to the new mayor, and we would hope that some kind of formal engagement between the mayor and the wider council, not just those who sit on the combined authority itself, we would hope that those will be in place, and I'll be able to update on those as we move forward. That's the report, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gillian. Are there any questions or comments on this report? It would seem not. Seem we're all satisfied with it. Thank you very much for this, Gillian. There's obviously a lot of work gone into it, a lot of things to consider, but it is looking pretty good now. So I'll say thank you very much for that. We're now going to move on to agenda item 8, where provides the committee with an update on the ongoing demand pressures in adult social care. We're welcoming Nicola Esmond, Service Director for Older People with Physical Disabilities, who I understand is attending the meeting for the first time. Is Nicola here? Has she got on?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Hello, Nicola. Could you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk through the report, obviously, which I'm going to assume you've read, so I won't go into an enormous amount of detail, so I'll just run through the highlights. So as you know, adult social care is one of the statutory functions of the council, and it provides a lifeline to lots and lots of people, around 5,500 people we look after in Wakefield district. The care is delivered mostly by the independent care sector, to which there was reference earlier, although some services are delivered directly by the council. So as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, during COVID-19, the sector's been under extreme pressure, and in the council with our partners and the providers have been working really hard to keep people safe and looked after. And although we've done a lot, we recognise there is still a lot to do, and we're still not out of the pandemic just yet. So that's the context. As far as the finances are concerned, the net budget for adult social care for next financial year is around £106 million, and that's roughly divided into 4 areas of spend. We spend around a net figure of £23.5 million on residential care, that's care homes and nursing homes. Special needs placements, these are people who need a higher degree of care, more staffing, safer premises, for example. We spend around £17 million on those service users. Non-residential care, this is domiciliary care in people's own homes, whether it's older people or supported living, learning disabilities or mental health. And that's around 36 million, which leaves around 29 million for our internal council services, social workers, and the services that we deliver internally. I'll just run through the main areas that we deal with and talk through some of the ongoing pressures. So we'll start with the residential care, the care homes and nursing homes. which obviously the ongoing pressures of trying to manage the infection risk in care homes, supporting the demand for visiting, and managing the staffing pressures, the workforce, not just related to keeping services going, but also the mental health and well-being of carers who have been at the front line of this pandemic for an awfully long time, and are very tired. And some of them are quite traumatised. Actually, we had quite a lot of losses in the care homes in the early months of the pandemic. Most providers are concerned about their financial sustainability, mostly in the residential sector, given the lower occupancy levels and the higher costs. And of course, there's a huge additional workload related to staff testing, resident testing, and all the rest of things. So we continue to support them in a number of ways in the council. We also continue to keep an eye on the safety of residents. One of the things about the lockdown is that we've had fewer feet across the threshold of care homes, so less opportunity for us to keep an eye on what's going on there. But we have seen a number of whistleblowing concerns raised through staffing, which does suggest that the staff themselves are keeping an eye on the quality and safety of residents. One of our residential care homes was closed over the last year. They were subject to a CQC inspection that had raised significant concerns, and I think the provider just decided it was time for her to exit the market. It was a residential home, and we are currently over-provided with residential places in Wakefield, so we were happy to support her to close the home, and all those residents have been moved safely to other homes. We've also had one of our nursing homes deregistered during this year, which is a little bit more of a concern because we do have fewer nursing places than we have residential, but we still have quite a lot of capacity in the district. I think we have about 50 nursing beds free at the moment. In financial terms, the cost of residential placements has decreased this financial year by around £1 million against projections. This is related obviously to the tragic number of additional deaths we've seen in care homes, but also that we've seen an understandable reluctance for people to move loved ones into care homes, whether that's for respite or whether it's for permanent care. In non-residential, we've not seen the equivalent level of concerns in the care home sector. By and large, services have been delivered consistently and with the same quality. We've changed the way that we paid domiciliary care providers this financial year. So we've paid a little bit more than what we normally pay, which is on actual care delivered. And we have seen a consequent level of satisfaction and the ability for providers to retain their staff as well because of this. Obviously, this isn't sustainable, so this is a small risk going into the next financial year. We did have 2 of our domiciliary care providers hand their contracts back this year, but their packages of care were picked up by other providers very quickly, and we feel that this may in fact have reinforced the safety of the market because we have more providers delivering more care, which makes them slightly more financially sustainable. Domiciliary care is rising, the costs are rising. This year rose by nearly £3 million net. It does reflect the fact that the waiting list was picked up because of the different way that we paid over the last year, but also perhaps an increase in people opting for home care, which is the right direction of travel for adult social care, keeping people in their homes, but it can be more costly. And overall, through a various number of different pots of money, COVID funding, infection control, lateral flow testing, we've invested around £10 million additional funding into the independent care sector this year to assist them with the pressures that they're facing. The rest of the report covers our internal services. So obviously we do deliver our own care. We have 3 care homes. We have a reablement and peripatetic teams which go into people's homes. We do shared lives, supported living and day opportunity services. All these services are managing well. We've had to strengthen staffing levels because we've seen equivalent experiences of people having to isolate, etc., which we've had to support. But overall, those services are all running well. Our social work teams in connecting care, assessment and care management and safeguarding. Again, we've seen significant changes in working practices, a lot more use of remote technology, although not when it replaces the need to see somebody face to face. Demand fluctuated during COVID, so there was a really reduced demand in the early months, but demand has returned and on occasions has exceeded usual levels. And I think you'll probably be aware that we have seen increasing concerns around safeguarding, particularly around domestic abuse and around mental health, which are like to have ongoing impacts on further service demands. One of the big things we've done over the last year is support for hospital discharge, keeping people out of hospital, getting them out of hospital as quickly as we can. It's been a significant focus over the pandemic, and we've worked really well with partners to do this. We've been discharging around 350 people per month, or supporting the discharges. I don't think I need to go too much through the risks. Obviously, we saw in the early months of the pandemic people discharged into care homes and the infection spread. So we have now 3 designated settings where we can move people to finish off their isolation period or to isolate safely before going home. And we only have a manageable number. I think it's around 10 to 12 care homes at the moment with managed outbreaks. A couple of main gaps that I wanted to pull out for you. The first is around hospital discharge and people with challenging behaviours, often as a result of dementia. We can struggle to find placements for people when they want to leave hospital and not quite well enough to go home. So we are looking at our options around this. And we do not currently have any designated, i.e. COVID-19 step-down nursing beds, but we're working with our Kirklees colleagues to perhaps be able to place in their beds if we need to. Generally, the pressures across adult social care remain the same. Insufficient funding, increased demand, and the workforce pressures, mainly related to the independent care sector, where we're not able to pay, or care workers are paid often at minimum wage, and there's not the progression opportunity. The other main pressure is the tiredness of the workforce, the trauma they've all been through, and the fact that it's not over yet. It does feel like although there is some light at the end of the tunnel, there's a long way to go. We're also conscious we need to be aware of plans to integrate health and social care, which we welcome as a logical next step, but are going to take some time for us to work through together. I just want to finish, sorry, I'm conscious I've gone on a while. We were worried about our service users, so we commissioned Health Watch Wakefield to do a telephone check-in survey of our service users on our behalf. They talked to 120 people, and we were delighted at the level of satisfaction we said about the from the council. And just my final point really is that in the recommendations, just note that there's an awful lot of work being done by the council and by our partners to mitigate ongoing demand pressures. And while we manage our adult social care budget very effectively in Wakefield, I think the need for adult social care support continues to increase, and we continue to experience the disadvantages of having a lack of a clear national solution.
Thank you very much, Nicola. There are 2 questions. So we've got one from David Dagger. David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I say that I think Nicola's answered my question during a brief, because my question is going to be about hospital discharge and care packages. So I'm happy with what you spoke about during a brief. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, David. And John?
Thank you, Chair. Also, Nicola dealt with part of my question as well, which is I'm very encouraged that the technology is not replacing any face-to-face. Also, for Bradley, I couldn't see how the significant risks that are faced in this area reflected in the priority risk map. Is it a case that these some I want to brought in? I looked at risk, I think it's 0009. That seemed to me the nearest thing that would represent some of the risks faced here, but there didn't seem any direct connection.
Hi, John. Yeah, happy to pick that up. Thank you for the question. Obviously, I don't have in front of me the full list of all of the risks that we have captured. So what I would propose probably on this one is if I can bring back to the committee when I next present risk a little table summarising all of the risks that we have captured in this area and how they are scored. I think I did this for IT-related risks a few months back, and that will then provide assurance to members that we are, obviously there are additional risks captured in additional registers, which we are constantly reviewing. So I can bring back a short summary of all of the risks that we have within this area for members to have a look at the next time.
For me, that would be ideal, please, because what I'm interested in is what are the controls that are in place and what support's in place to make sure that delivery is maintained.
Yeah, that's noted, John. I can absolutely do that. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments on Nicola's very good report? No, appears to be okay. So I take it then we're happy to accept this report and the recommendations therein. We'll take silence as a yes. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you very much, Nicola. That was very interesting.
Thank you very much, Chair.
And I think we'd all agree with you that in the absence of a clear national solution, it's going to be something that's always going to be difficult. Okay, well, thank you.
We promised it this year, apparently, so we shall see.
Okay. we'll see, yeah. Thank you very much, Nicola. Okay, now, agenda item 9 is the annual report of the Standards Committee, which is presented by Gillian Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. So this, as it says, is your annual report. You will recall doing a piece of work in this area, culminating in a report in November 2019, where we were looking at making changes to the processes and systems, and that was agreed by this committee, subsequently went on and was agreed by the Standards Committee, but due to COVID-19, it wasn't agreed by full council until December. So we're now in the process of making those changes. So there's not a huge amount of content in this report as you've got it in front of you today. There have definitely been delays to getting the new processes up and running. So we're not able to provide you with assurances as to how well they work yet. And there have been some delays to investigations. And those are now moving through the system. So since Council agreed the changes in December, we have moved forward. Councillor Pat Garbett has now taken over as chair of the Standards Committee, and she has had a briefing and has set a meeting for the next Standards Committee for the 8th of March, and also some meetings for subcommittees to look at some of the complaints that we're dealing with at the moment. So I would hope that very soon we can get back onto normal business as usual. The main thing that the committee will be looking at on the 8th of March when it meets is the new LGA Model Code of Conduct. You may recall that this was something recommended by Standards for Public Life when they reported. We haven't yet got any of the legislation that underpins that, but the LGA have moved ahead on a cross-party basis and produced a new model code, which will be considered by Standards Committee, and any amendments will be considered then by full council at the AGM. In terms of the investigations, because they're at a stage yet where we haven't fully considered them, I've not given you a table of complaints that we've had this year. We've had a couple of complaints about district council matters, but the vast majority of our complaints have been in relation to parish council matters. Obviously, I suspect most of the members of this committee will have seen the publicity around Handforth Parish Council. I'm pleased to say we're not quite at that level, but we have received a number of complaints about parish councils and about the way that they operate. So obviously, once those go through the system, next year's annual report will include that level of detail. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Are there any questions or comments for Gillian? Appear not. So I guess we accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to agenda item 10. So it's the first of 3 assured items, and this report is on the delivery of the Council's technology strategy. And for this, we're joined by Darren Gill, who's the Service Director of Technology and Digital Transformation. So Darren, if I could ask you to present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides assurances to assure service delivery system resilience and value for money. We've had historic underinvestment over many years, which has resulted in a complex technology environment at Wakefield Council, which does accrue higher levels of risk relative to similar organisations. We have established a technology board, as described in the paper, and that board now considers robust business cases that identify how the technology strategy is being applied and details the benefits that will accrue from any investment. We have received additional revenue investment in 2021, which allowed us to recruit to begin mitigating the risk of business failure due to increased incidence of system outages. That recruitment is largely completed. It was diverted for a period due to COVID. We have engaged support from an expert recruitment agency, Harvey Nash, in order to attract a suitable field. An injection of additional recurring revenue investment agreed at the August 2020 meeting of Cabinet to extend our new enterprise application platform, initially into adults integrated care, has been accompanied by substantial organisational change for the Technology and Digital Transformation Service and recruitment activity. New staff will start coming on board in the next few weeks, albeit a risk is beginning to emerge in relation to attracting a suitable field for some key roles where the market is offering substantially more in salaries than we can currently offer. The last substantial investment of recurring revenue will be to unleash the technology that improves productivity of council staff through modern tools and infrastructure. It will also improve collaboration between partners, including in the health and social care sector, and safeguard council data to inform business decision making, as well as further simplifying the tech environment and increase digital skills across the Wakefield Council workforce. Phase 1 of modern workplaces, as we call it, is underway, but the next 3 phases will be crucial to modernising our infrastructure to provide long-term convenience and productivity benefits for residents, business partners and staff. There's a business case proceeding to Cabinet in April in relation to the next phase of the modern workplace projects, and that largely revolves around continuing to roll out the modern Microsoft stack, including Microsoft 365 and the Teams video conferencing arrangements that are associated with that. That's my summary of the report.
Thank you very much, Darren. There's one question waiting from Councillor Dave Thacker. Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Darren, you said you're having a problem recruiting the calibre of staff or some members of staff that you're wanting to recruit. What risk does this pose to the IT section?
So we are continuing to try to recruit to these key positions. The ones that we are having some difficulty filling relate to test management, so testing IT developments before they're released. We are continuing to work with Harvey Nash. What I think we will do, we do have other tools available to us within Wakefield Council's HR policies, which we haven't yet looked at to perhaps slightly boost the salaries. And we will look at exploring that. So I'm still hopeful that there is a way to mitigate this risk. And in the meantime, we will just need to divert other resource onto the test management.
Is that okay, Dave? Yeah. Right, thank you. There's another question and comment from Alan Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question to Gillian, really. She's probably aware my son works with Darren in IT. I don't know whether I should declare an interest.
I think it's helpful, Councillor Garbutt, that we note that that is an interest, but not one that would prevent you from taking part in the meeting, because obviously what you're doing is seeking assurances about how things are working. You're not actually making decisions that impact upon the service.
Thank you.
Thank you. If that's so no more questions and comments, then can we accept the report and its recommendations? Okay, yeah, looks like it. Thank you very much, Darren.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we can move on to the next item of the agenda, is the assurance report on the Council's financial control environment and compliance with the Chief Finance Officer protocol. And the Chief Finance Officer is going to present this. Over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Chair. We've actually got Michael Wildman on the call today, who's authored the report. So I've asked Mick if he can present it to committee this morning.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Hello, Michael.
Hi, thank you, Chair. For the minutes, I'm Mick Wildman, the Service Manager for Financial Management. This report provides policy assurance that the financial control environment and the governance arrangements of the Council are fit for purpose, up to date and embedded across the Council. It's quite a lengthy report, but I'll just pick out some of the more important issues. In terms of financial management framework, the framework and the Chief Officer protocol are continually being evaluated to ensure they remain fit for purpose. In terms of financial planning, the Council has a proven approach to the development of its financial plan and its annual budget setting. So the MTFS was agreed by Cabinet in October, and the 2021-22 budget was approved at Budget Council last week. In terms of financial management, the Council's budget and policy framework clearly articulates roles and responsibilities and aligns financial accountability within service decision maker. And on a monthly basis, reports are presented to director management teams and the Council's Cabinet. With a set of comprehensive financial procedure rules, and as part of the system of financial control, these provide the framework for managing the Council's financial affairs. In terms of capital, we've got a multi-year capital programme. Once again, this was approved at Cabinet Budget Council last week, and this was approved alongside our capital and investment strategy. And quarterly updates on the financial performance of the programme are provided to Cabinet. In terms of financial control, external audit provides the independent assurance on the Council's accounts and accounting practices, and there's an agreed framework for internal audit that satisfies guidance and regulations. One of the key developments this year is the introduction of a financial management code, and this has been developed by our professional body SITFA. And the code provides guidance for good and sustainable financial management in local authorities. The code has to be adopted and followed from April, which is next month, and requires authorities to demonstrate that the processes they have in place satisfy the principles of good financial management. There are 6 principles, and these are detailed in section 10.2. And underpinning these 6 principles are 17 financial management standards. And these are minimum standards required to ensure compliance with the code. And these are shown in summary in the appendix to this report. In November, the Council took a self-assessment for the 2021 financial year in what's termed a shadow year. So of the 17 standards, it was determined that we are fully compliant in 12, with 5 requiring minor to moderate improvement. We shared this with SITFA, who have been engaged as our expert opinion leaders. They've undertaken a virtual review over a 2-week period and agreed in principle with the findings, with a number of areas for expansion and improvement, and these are shown in section 10.4. Their feedback was very positive, so we can take some positive out of that in terms of both content and format. And they have said that the undertaking of such a review a year early is extremely good practice, so that's good as well. The code will now be fully evaluated during 21-22 and reported back to this committee in due course, and I envisage this will form a significant part of this assurance in future years. So members are asked to note that appropriate systems and procedures are in place, ensuring there is sound financial management control across the Council, and note that arrangements are set out in the Chief Finance Officer protocol have been complied with, and that there are no amendments required to be made. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mick. Are there any questions or comments on this report? No, it doesn't look like it. Thank you very much. Certainly very reassuring that compliance has been demonstrated right across the board. So thank you very much for that. We can go on to the next item of the agenda now. Again, thank you again, Mick. Item 12 is the final assurance report, and it looks at the Council's decision-making arrangements. This is going to be presented by Mark Tolson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, excuse me. This is a further report which is presented today as part of the committee's ongoing programme of assurance reporting, examining how the Council takes its decisions. So the information set out in the report reflects the decision-making arrangements for the period the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2020. The COVID pandemic has obviously had a huge impact on the way in which our decisions have been taken, certainly for 3 quarters of that period. And you'll recall that this was reported to committee in January as part of the wider impact of COVID-19 on the Council's internal control environment report. So the report here today references the information previously reported rather than repeating it again. The Council decision-making framework is set out within the Council's constitution, and it comprises the systems and the processes through which our decision-making is directed and controlled. There is often a challenge of deciding who should take what decision. It isn't, however, a free-for-all, as there are regulations in place which separate those functions and responsibilities into decisions that need to be taken by Council, those which are executive decisions, and some local choice functions where the Council chooses whether the function should be exercised by Council or the executive. And this is set out in Part 3 of the Constitution. I think the basic premise is that a function will be an executive function under the executive arrangements unless legislation specifically states that it's for Council, or in a handful of cases the legislation lets Council choose whether it is a Council or executive decision. So this report looks at 4 aspects of our decision-making arrangements and asks 4 questions. Are they up to date? Are they fit for purpose? Are they effectively communicated? And importantly, they are routinely complied with. So looking at the first two aspects, our arrangements up to date and fit for purpose. Article 15 of the Council's Constitution requires that the monitoring officer is aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the Constitution, and that she ensures that the aims and principles are given full effect. So ordinarily, each year, the monitoring officer leads a review of the Constitution to ensure that it remains up to date and fit for purpose. One implication of the pandemic was that the annual review in 2020 was paused. However, during the course of the year, it was updated to reflect decisions taken by Council alongside those emergency decision-making arrangements brought about as a direct result of the pandemic and as previously reported to committee in January. From an assurance perspective, the correct procedures have been taken, with all updates recorded by way of a delegated decision, a record of which is published on the Council's website. Decisions taken by the leader during the period were also made in accordance with proper process and in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution and the leader's executive leader powers. You will recall that in the absence of the annual meeting in 2020, the leader did take the opportunity to review cabinet member portfolios to ensure that they not only align to the Council's new managerial structure, but also ensure that there was a sharp focus on Council priorities. This resulted in changes to the portfolios for climate change and the portfolio for environment, communities and poverty. The climate change portfolio is now known as climate change and green spaces. You'll see that paragraph 8 makes reference to our arrangements to delegate functions to Council committees and to individual officers through the officer scheme of delegation. Over the summer period, work was undertaken to produce sub-delegation schemes on a standardised template whereby each director who is authorised to make a decision under the authority of the Constitution, scheme of delegation or an executive decision may then in turn authorise other officers of suitable experience and seniority to make those decisions on their behalf. In terms of the assurance, there is some further work to be undertaken in this area, as not all schemes have been signed off at this stage. There's some further work to be undertaken within the Communities, Environment and Climate Change Directorate to reflect the new structure. Sub-delegation schemes are fully in place within the Children and Young People's Directorate and published on the Council's website. Work is also ongoing to look to refresh our delegated decision-making arrangements, and this ongoing work is referred to in paragraph 9. Once this is refined and approved, its introduction will be supported by a programme of training. So whilst we've discussed our remote meeting arrangements in January, one potentially significant update is the debate as to whether primary legislation is in fact required to extend the existing regulations beyond May 2021. To assist the Secretary of State, lawyers in local government and the Association of Democratic Services Officers have sought Council's opinion in relation to the expiry of the regulations and the ability to hold Council meetings remotely past the 7th of May. To that end, an opinion has been provided on options available to extend the regulations without the requirement for primary legislation, and as such a declaration from the courts is currently being sought. So we continue to wait with some cautious optimism to see what the provision the government will make to allow councils to continue with remote meetings beyond May 2021, so that we can move forward with some confidence. The next aspect covered in the report is are the council decision-making arrangements routinely complied with? And I would say at the outset that it is the responsibility of each service director and service manager to ensure that the rules are routinely complied with. The Chief Legal Officer, committee team manager and myself are there to provide help and guidance. I thought it would be helpful just to reference and to get an understanding of the numbers of decisions taken and recorded in accordance with the decision-making framework and compare those to 2019, the period before COVID. So over the course of the reporting period, 64 key decisions were taken. 53 of these were taken by Cabinet itself as a collective, and 11 by individual executive members by way of a delegation, and 4 of these being urgent. Members of Cabinet took a total of 120 delegated decisions during 2020. All members of Council, alongside Overview and Scrutiny Co-opted members, receive information of each member delegated decision taken, thereby commencing the 5-day calling period. And during the year, 1 decision was called in, and the details of that decision can be found in paragraph 11.7 of the report. There have also been occasions where the prescribed decision-making route has not been followed, and committee have previously received details of those decisions where the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board has agreed to waive that calling period to allow speedy implementation of those COVID-related decisions. Over the course then of the reporting period, a further 237 recordable operational decisions were taken by officers in consultation with the appropriate Cabinet member, and those decisions are recorded on the Officer Delegated Decision Register, which is again published on the Council's website. From an assurance perspective, I mean, overall, there is general compliance with the rules. There have, however, been some isolated occasions during the year where the rules have not been followed to the letter. I think this was primarily down to a lack of understanding from individual officers and assumptions that things were being picked up by others. So I think looking forward, to coincide with the revised rules around delegated decision making, a programme of training is planned to take place over the course of the year to raise knowledge and understanding in this area, and which is important going forward. Paragraph 12 then sets out how the decision-making framework process is supported and highlights the advice and guidance which is provided to officers. So from the review, assessment and ongoing monitoring carried out, I think it is clear that there is a general compliance across the Council with the Council decision-making requirements. There are lots of new people working within the Council, and as such it is recognised that there is a need to raise understanding and knowledge in the area, which will be addressed through a programme of training, which will not only be helpful to those who are new to the organisation, but also act as a refresher to others. And this will also coincide with the revised rules around delegated decision making, alongside any changes made at the annual meeting of Council in May. I will leave it there, Chair, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this very full and comprehensive report. Are there any questions or comments? No. Right, thank you. Final item is the standing item setting out the reports which are to be brought forward to our final meeting of the municipal year, which is set out on page 110 of the agenda. Before I get into that, I believe Colette wishes to tell us something about the statement of account.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, can you? I wasn't sure if you could hear me then. Sorry, my name's Colette. All right, thank you. So my name's Colette Tyrrell, and I thought it would be useful for members of the committee to get an update of the 1920 statement of accounts and the audit of the accounts that were presented to. I think the accounts were presented to committee in November. Nicola Wright, the audit partner, has agreed to provide this update for you.
Hello everyone, it's Nicola Wright here. So it's quite a brief update. It's just to let you know that we have now concluded our audit work on the 2019-20 accounts. So we didn't make any significant changes. We did make some disclosure amendment updates from the version that was brought to the November committee, but we made no changes to the actual numbers in the primary statements or the notes. We've updated our ICT60 report and shared that with Colette and with Neil. Our whole of government accounts work now just requires completion, so that's where we submit a return centrally to the National Audit Office on the numbers in your financial statement. So that work is just to be concluded, but we're liaising closely with Colette and her team to do that. In terms of signing the opinion, we're just waiting for an internal clearance just to allow us to sign the opinion, but in terms of the substantive work, that is now complete.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicola. Have you anything to add, Colette?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So the rolling work programme is there just to be noted, and members may add to this if they feel it is necessary. Now, I assume if there's silence, I'll confirm. I'll take that as confirmation that you're happy with the agenda for April. I know we obviously have to put on the climate change. This well. Okay, there is silence, so I assume we're all satisfied with that. So that was the last item on today's agenda, and thank you all for your attendance. And there's some good news. Is Jason Brooke is getting better, is making good progress, and he's expected to get back in a phased return in a couple of weeks' time. So obviously that's very good news. Now, could I ask for the live feed to be switched off, please?